There's been an effort on the part of the JW upper management to remove certain instances of the divine counsel from the Bible, and the reasons for this are not 100% clear to us at this point. It is the Apostle Paul who perhaps has the greatest role in spoiling this cover-up. The story begins when the so-called Septuagint version of the Old Testament, or L.I.S.A, was written during the 3rd and 2nd centuries BCE. Presumably, the Jewish community in Egypt needed a Greek translation of the Old Testament, the reason being that Greek was the common language of the region at the time. So the main point here is that the Septuagint came first and was quoted by Paul in the New Testament. Then came the Masoretic, assembled by scholars at Talmudic academies between the 6th and 10th centuries AD. The Masoretes were rabbis who made it their special work to correct the faults that had crept into the text of the Old Testament during the Babylonian captivity. So it turns out that the Masoretic text is suspicious in that there was an agenda in mind when it was being compiled and assembled. The agenda was one of correction, and of course, one man's correction is seen by another man as tampering. Though it has been noted that a large portion of the Masoretic text is consistent with the Dead Sea Scrolls, there are still some significant inconsistencies. This is where the Jehovah's Witnesses come into the picture. They favor the Masoretic Old Testament over the Septuagint, L.I.S.A, on account of it being considered the commonly accepted authoritative version. At Deuteronomy 32:8, the New World Translation cites the number of the sons of Israel as the measure used to fix the boundary of the people. However, the reason this makes no sense is because at the time the boundaries for the nations were set at Genesis 10, there was no such thing as the sons of Israel, because neither Jacob nor his sons had come into existence yet. So, the question remains, what was the actual basis for the boundaries of the nations? Well, as it turns out, the L.I.S.A gives us a clue about what Deuteronomy 32:8 originally said. If we make the reasonable assumption that the Masoretes made alterations to this passage, we then turn to the wording of the L.I.S.A, which means angels of God. Here's where the story gets very interesting. In the 2012 version of the Watchtower Library software, verse 43 of Deuteronomy 32 shows an alternate L.I.S.A version of the text. If you have this version, simply click on or run your arrow over the asterisk directly to the left of the letter M. Here we see the term angels of God mentioned, as well as reference to Hebrews 1:6. The reason they have put this effort into providing the alternate Septuagint version of Deuteronomy 32:43 is strictly because the Apostle Paul quotes this passage at Hebrews 1:6. Omitting this L.I.S.A passage in favor of the Masoretic version would be deleting the source of Paul's New Testament quotation. It would be like Paul handing in a report to his teacher with sources that don't exist. So, as much as JWs like to make key pieces of information disappear, it would be very difficult to do so in this situation. Note that when Paul wrote in Greek, angels of God, he was referring to spiritual beings that are literally angels of God and not human sons of Israel. Also, in the alternate L.I.S.A version of Deuteronomy 32:43, angels of God could not possibly be confused with human sons of Israel. Again, the L.I.S.A preceded the Masoretic text by many centuries, and, especially in light of the rabbi's agenda to clean up or rewrite the text, it is very safe to draw the conclusion that the boundaries were based on the number of God's angels, or at least a particular brand of them. In case you still have doubts about the accuracy of our information, take a look at the Targum version of the text in question. It was written in Aramaic, and scholars date it to around the 2nd or 3rd century CE. Deuteronomy 32:8 reads, "When the Most High made allotment of the world unto the nations which proceeded from the sons of Noach, in the separation of the writings and languages of the children of men at the time of the division, he cast the lot among the 70 angels, the princes of the nations with whom is the revelation to oversee the city. Even at that time he established the limits of the nations according to the sum of the number of the 70 souls of Israel who went down into Mizraim. This particular Targum is a written version of the original explanation of the text as it would have been taught in the synagogue at the time. What we learn from this Targum is that the princes of the nation were 70 angels who were appointed as overseers. Then we see that there is a notion that, even at that time, the number 70 was based on the future event of Jacob settling in Mizraim or Egypt. Now it becomes very clear that over time, the teachings about the angel princes were phased out. That is why early translations include them while later ones do not. One more thing that should be noted about the 70 angels is the Targum's description of a portion of the Babel incident found at Genesis 11, verse 7. And the Lord said to the 70 angels which stand before him, Come, we will descend and will there commingle their language, that a man shall not understand the speech of his neighbor. This sounds a lot like a divine council, doesn't it? Moving on to verse 8, the text reads, And the word of the Lord was revealed against the city, and with him 70 angels, having reference to 70 nations, each having its own language. When we compare these verses to the New World Translation, there is a big difference. At verse 7, Jehovah says, Come, let us go down there and confuse their language. As expected, there is no explanation of who exactly Jehovah is addressing, apart from the cross-reference to Genesis 1:26. Those citations in the marginal references point to Jesus, but obviously this is leading us on a wild goose chase. 70 angels of God does not equal one Jesus, so all the margin notes simply don't add up. As much as the witnesses would like to think that their masters have a complete grip on Scripture, we can see that they don't.